Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the Gloucester, special meeting of the Gloucester School Committee to order. It's Thursday, August 5th, 2021. And I'll remind everybody that the mission of Gloucester Public Schools is for all students to be successful, engaged, lifelong learners. This meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with the open meeting law, consistent with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and banning certain gatherings such as that an in-person meeting of the school committee is not possible. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary. That being said, we are in a hybrid mode right now, and the school committee is here in person at Gloucester High School, but the public is attending via Zoom. We are going to continue this setup through August, and we'll at the end of August we'll discuss maybe transitioning to actually having more people in person if conditions allow. Tonight we are having some technical difficulties, which is part of all of why we're doing this in person, is to figure out what they are. And so I apologize that I believe that the sound and the picture may not be quite in sync. That being said, can we have a roll call of the school committee members present?
Chairman Pope.
Here.
Ms. Prince.
Here.
Kathy Clancy.
Here.
Ms. Weason.
Here.
And Ms. Watson.
Here.
Okay. We will forgo the salute to the flag, and I would just like to say that it's very important. We're going to be getting our first information about the recommendations coming out of the state, both from the DESE as well as the commissioner and the governor as to what they're recommending for reopening of schools. The solution to a safer reopening of schools is for everybody to get vaccinated. And I can't say that how important that is. And people who aren't getting vaccinated are the people that are going to be forcing us to continue to wear masks and continue to socially distance and put limits on what we can do. So the solution is to get vaccinated. So we are having this special meeting for the purpose of taking care of some business issues that are time sensitive, as well as to get an update from the superintendent about the recommendations coming out of the state. So the first order of business is the approval of the city clerk's request, permission to use Plum Cove School for the Ward 4-2 polling location for municipal elections on September 14th, 2021. And they are needed. So November 2nd and future elections. And I so move.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Watson.
Yes.
Ms. Weason. Yeah. Kathy Clancy.
Yes.
Chairman Pope.
Yes.
And Ms. Prince.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. The second order of business is to appoint the superintendent, Ben Lummis, as the Gloucester representative to North Shore Education Consortium Business Board for 2021-22. And I so move.
Second.
Is there any discussion? You want to say a few words about how important this is?
No, I think it's assumed. I hope all of you will support me in being named to the board. Otherwise, one of you will need to be named to the board.
No, you have my
Sounds like a
support.
threat.
It's information.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Maria, can we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Watson.
Yes.
Ms. Weason.
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Chairman Pope.
Yes,
And Ms. Prince.
Yes.
and that passes unanimously. So welcome to another year on the board of the consortium.
Thank you.
The third order of business is to make a request, to approve a request to the mayor to ask the city council, actually it'd be the police department, I believe, to enforce the attached city council certificate of vote, certificate number 2018-2 dated February 13th, 2018. And what that is, when we first had problems in 2018 with the traffic on Concord Street because of the pickup, the dismissal at West Parish School, we had the traffic commission, we had the police chief at the time, and a number of city councilors weigh in, and we came up with a recommendation that was to make a left turn only coming out of the school for the hours during this dismissal, which I believe is 2:45 to
Right turn.
3:15.
Right turn only?
Right turn only coming out.
Coming out, right turn.
So they can only go up to, they can't go back against
Sure.
the queue. It was also in that, we should have it here, so I can probably read it. So the motion, and I'll just read the motion that was passed by the city council. On a motion by Councilor LeBlanc, seconded by Councilor Nolan, the city council voted 9 in favor, 0 opposed to amend CGO Chapter 22, Traffic and Motor Vehicles, Section 22-267, one-way streets generally by adding, while school is in session on weekdays, Concord Street from the entrance of West Parish School southwest to Essex Avenue, approximately 285 feet, from 2:45 to 3:15, and on early release days from 11:45 to 12:15. And that would be effective June 30th, 2018. Now, that was never enforced. It was, they approved the right turn only, which actually the city council didn't have to approve. That was our decision because it's school property. But they never enforced it because they wanted to see how it worked. And somehow during COVID, it worked that year pretty well, but they never enforced the one way from the entrance to West Parish School up to Essex Avenue. What this will do, it will not allow people to come from Essex Avenue on Concord Street while the queue is making it essentially a one-lane road at the corner. And therefore, the people coming from the Wingashiek side would have to go out around it and be in the other lane, and there were potential head-on collisions with people coming the other way. This will prevent people from coming the other way. So this is the solution to the safety issue, which we've heard so much about. And this ordinance is in place, and all we're doing here is asking the administration to enforce it, which would mean putting up signs as well as perhaps some police details at the beginning to get people used to it. So that being said, I so move.
Second.
Discussion, Melissa?
So a couple of years ago, we were trying to get police enforcement on 133 to prevent parents from parking and then walking their children into West Parish School, and that request to the police department did not happen. I believe there was some talk that maybe it was a state highway, and that could have been some input for the reason of why they was not enforced. So now, I believe that's 133, or what is that road, Concord Street? That's not.
No, Concord Street's not a state road. Essex
Right,
Avenue
Essex
is.
Ave is, and we're looking to have Essex Ave
No.
blocked, or just, it's gonna go the
No.
other way, it's gonna go down and not come back.
All we're doing is making Concord Street one way from the entrance to West Parish School up to Essex Avenue
Okay, so it's.
in that direction. So people coming to go into the school have to come from the Wingasheet side of Concord Street. People leaving West Parish School cannot turn towards Wingasheet. They have to drive up to Essex Avenue. And if they're going to Wingasheet, end of Concord, then they have to get on 128 and loop around and go that way. It's not,
For how long? I'm sorry.
What?
For how long a time is this?
it's for a half an hour from 2:45 to 3:15. I've observed that queue, and the queue is gone by 3:10 on a regular basis.
So it's similar to what we do at East Gloucester. So it's a common practice in Gloucester to do this type of traffic control. I guess, of course, I would support this. I guess I would just ask that you take a step further and reach out to the police department. Someone reach out to the police department to find out if there's any concerns enacting this,
Right.
to find out why they didn't enact our request before. I just want to make sure that there's no underlying issues with street roads, city roads, or whatever could be in potential barrier to getting this to happen.
I believe, and I was at that meeting, that what was discussed by the council was to implement it in phases and just do the right turn only coming out and see if that helped.
Okay.
And then during 2018-19 school year, people, they had time and people to kind of work with that and make the parents aware of it. And it was, I don't remember having a lot of complaints about that year. And it wasn't until COVID when everybody was riding, when we couldn't transport kids in buses and everybody was driving their kids, that we started to have problems. And we should have gone back to this then, but we were busy. Laura?
Will there be a police officer there to enforce?
Well, that's what we're asking for, is that they enforce it. Now, as far as Melissa's concerned, I will just say that there's a different police chief now.
Right.
Than there was then. Kathy?
Neighbors are gonna also have to be aware, because if they were coming from town on Essex Ave, take a right
Yes.
to their,
Yes.
to do what they normally would do. So just have to be some awareness
Yeah.
and some, in the newspaper.
It's yeah, they'll just have to, like I say, get on 128 and go down to Concord Street and come back that way. There are some houses there, not a lot, there are some.
So essentially, we've had a plan in place to help with traffic, and it just hasn't
Been
happened
implemented, it
in
was never implemented.
this year. Hopefully we got it.
Samantha?
I've had a parent reach out about a possible crossing guard so that people who live on Essex Ave within walking distance of the school can walk versus driving. And I think that that's even more important if we do implement this, because those folks will then have to go sort of all the way around
Right,
and not just down Concord. So I think there are a couple families that would prefer to walk if there's a safer alternative.
And that's at Essex and Concord, that request?
Yeah.
Can we have one?
we've had them before. I think this year there was difficulty hiring.
There was.
And maybe we have to look at what we pay. Crossing guards. So, yes, there needs to be, there are a number of houses from the railroad bridge all the way down to Concord Street, people that could walk. I don't know how many kids live in those houses, but there are a fair number of houses.
Yep.
Anything else? So as I said, this is just asking the city to enforce an ordinance that's already on the books. And it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Oh, actually is on
Online?
virtual, it looks like,
Okay,
and he has raised his hand.
yes, ways to stand.
But we can't see him and he's not here, part of the meeting.
Well, Maria can see him and all the people can see him. Is that true?
He is an attendee, yeah, he is,
Oh, he wants to get,
okay.
So are we allowing remote participation right now?
Yeah, so didn't it say that in the email?
yeah.
Well,
he's-
if you meet certain standards.
Yeah.
So,
Which he can't be here because he's in another meeting.
Which I don't know that.
Is he a panelist?
he
now?
has his hand up and he's unmuted,
But is he a panelist?
so he can hear you if you talk to him.
Okay, would he like to speak?
I was just prepping myself so that when the vote happens, you could hear me. I'm on the way from the last meeting into this meeting now. But I was listening to the discussion.
Okay, good thing you got a fast car.
Just drive safely, please.
Okay, we could wait a minute to vote for Joel.
No, I'll vote this way.
Okay.
That's okay. I'm in a
Okay.
parking lot waiting for the vote and then I'll come over.
Okay. All right, roll call vote.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Palazzo,
Yes,
Chairman Pope.
Yes.
And Ms. Prince.
Yes.
Yes. So we will convey this information. This carries unanimously, and we'll convey this information to the city directly. I have talked to a number of councilors saying that this is what we're going to be doing. Okay, there was another item on the agenda about memorial tree. And I would like to table that issue because I have had a discussion with Mike Hale and he has some concerns and we would like to look into the whole issue of memorial trees a little bit deeper before we start approving them. We're in the middle trying to deal with a couple of memorial trees that are at the veteran site and it's become problematic. So without objection, I'd like to table that till the next meeting.
And should I reach out to the folks who, or do you want, I can reach out or you can reach out? Just to give them an update.
Yeah, I can reach out because I like to have him meet with Mike Hale because he has some issues about, memorial
Okay,
trees.
yep, I understand. Okay, great.
Okay. All right, that being said, we'll move on to the informational part of our meeting, and that is updates on state guidance on returning to school, and I'll hand it over to Superintendent Thomas.
Thank you. Maria, you're able to show that presentation, the PDF I sent you? Just tell me when you're ready to go. And we'll go. And the members have printed copies of them as well.
It's on my screen. How do I make it in the presentation mode?
Oh, yeah.
Something that says-
My picture's not on. the call, my voice. 37. That's why I was. Do you want to see? Scroll down.
The attendees?
37.
And is that counting us?
Joel, though. No, doesn't. It's just attendees, not panelists.
Okay, we're just waiting for us to get the presentation up on so people can view it online.
Okay, good evening, folks. So one thing we learned last year is that every day matters in our schools. And it's a very broad we, because it took the whole city, all of our staff, our teachers, our school leaders, all of you, and a lot of other folks to make sure that we were in school every day last year. And by doing that, something that very few schools are able to do across the Commonwealth, we really, really got a sense of how for our students, every day matters, and every day matters for them to be in school. So you're gonna hear that a lot from me this year. I think a lot from all of us, because it's really, really was driven home last year and something we really want to continue. So on tonight's update, I'm going to give you a quick update just on kindergarten school choice, because things happen a little bit differently this year than in the past. And then I'll give you an update on school opening, just the work we're doing now to prepare for the new school year. That will include a pretty significant update just on the guidance that's been released by the state. We'll work with you and others in the coming month to sort that out, basically. But today is really sort of just an update. No decisions tonight at all, but we'll map out where we're headed from here. So, and then I'll give updates on our current planning, Gloucester COVID data, where we stand now, the latest guidance from the Department of Education, the Department of Health, and then where we're going from here. So just quickly on kindergarten school choice. So you're looking at a slide now. The important part here.
But
How do we go to the next slide?
Oh, hit what if you hit an arrow? Second.
Yeah, buying some time, it was
A lot
nice.
of new different things, working through them. So on this slide, you see kindergarten school choice, the table, the blue or shaded row, first shade of available space for school choice. So you'll see that Beaman is fully enrolled before we even look at school choice. So that's why there's 0 space before school choice. East Gloucester has some spaces available, 8 spaces. Plum Cove is actually over enrolled at 43 students just with its home district students. Veterans has 2 spaces available, and West Parish is oversubscribed by three individuals. Okay, which is different than the past, and hasn't been that way in any of our schools for quite some time. Once you see school choice in, school choice out, so we took those requests from this. These are folks who live in Gloucester, but in different school zones than their home, then want to attend schools that are outside of their home school zone. So you saw there's some adjustments here. You'll notice Plum Cove and West Parish, who are both oversubscribed with just their home, school zone students. No students were choiced in for both those schools, and still they're oversubscribed by a little bit, and that's a reasonable amount in terms of over the class size guidelines of 20 students per kindergarten. But what that does mean, importantly, and different than in the past, is that there are some families who have siblings at those 2 schools, want to choice into West Parish or Plum Cove, and there is not room available for them. That's 5 families at Plum Cove and 4 families at West Parish. And so we've communicated with those families, talked to them directly, or left messages, and are also following up with them as they have questions. Not surprisingly, but trying to explain to them just what I'm explaining to all of you is that it's a new thing, honestly, or hasn't happened for quite some time. That's always a risk in terms of school choice, but it's something we haven't had to deal with in a while. We are dealing with it this year, so it's a tough situation to be in. In some ways, it's good for our enrollment, but it's hard for these families, obviously. So I just want to make sure you knew about that.
Yeah. So, was this looked at the idea that some of the incoming kindergarten classes, students that were in catchment but didn't have any other siblings at the school, could have said, let's say I'm naturally in the Plum Cove catchment, but Plum Cove's oversubscribed, and there's several families with siblings already choiced in. Was there looking to sending that new kindergarten student in the Plum Cove catchment typically out to Beaman or anything like that?
No, because your policy says that anybody who's in the home catchment, has a right to go to that school. And we've never, as far as I know, I don't,
Sure.
Of course, we've never sort of reached out to people and said, do you want to go to a different school? there's no procedure on that. There's no policy on that. Has been no practice of that. So I did not consider that.
Just seeing before you start splitting families up, if there was an opportunity, because then especially, and I have no idea where these families are coming from, but any families in the downtown area, those catchment districts are such crazy, zigzags anyway. Someone's at Beaman, someone's at Plum Cove, someone's at East Gloucester, and they're all on Prospect Street, right? It may not have been a heavy lift to say, hey, you're on the part of Prospect Street that usually goes to East Gloucester, or usually goes to Plum Cove. Can we put you with the rest of the Prospect Street kids that go to East Gloucester, right?
Yeah.
And then the Plum Cove family doesn't have to have a kid at Plum Cove and a kid at Beaman or a kid at West, or whatever it is,
Sure, yeah. One way the school districts deal with that is what we call buffer zones. I'm not sure if you've used them in Gloucester in the past, but you'll have some border areas which have, two school there, so I'm just using Prospect Street as an example. So a Prospect Street or part of Prospect Street could be zoned to 2 different schools. And therefore, when you get schools very highly enrolled, you have the ability to balance them out. And that is a way of keeping families together, honestly. We don't have that in place. As we go forward, particularly with the new school, zoning will have to be looked at. And as buffer zones at that point, something we could consider.
Okay.
We don't have those in place right now. There hasn't been a need, honestly, in my understanding, for any of this sort of thing. But we may be entering a new, it could be a blip. It's hard to know. And I think, and we also do have to just make sure these class sizes don't get too big, because when families move into the zone, they have a right to go to that home school district as well. And it's still early. We're still August, 5th. So.
Sure. I think the last one we did was we took Allen Street either out of vets and put East, or out of East Gloucester and put it into vets or something like that to balance it. So,
Yeah, right. So we can make adjustments. They have, going forward, really.
Right. Okay, so I don't begrudge you the situation. It's always a bummer to hear that
Yeah.
a family's getting split. And if there are in the future ways to avoid this by getting a fresh family that's not ingrained in one school yet, say, hey, you were zoned for A, can we send you to B? Yes.
So I know we're trying to keep our class sizes at a particular number, but class sizes of 20 in my history of being in an elementary school, there were kindergarten classes that were 22 or 23 sometimes. So as we near school, would there be any consideration that that situation could, that the siblings could be allowed, given that, we're not at 25, but if we're at 21 or 22, knowing we probably have paraprofessionals in the kindergarten classrooms as well, it's not just the teacher.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if there was any consideration instead of a hard and fast number as it relates to siblings.
So it does, couple things is, so we do have to wait as things sort out, and we'd have to, and I think the last time, one of the more recent times it's happened, which isn't recent, I'll give you East Gloucester examples. We waited until the second or third week of school to see how things sorted out. There, at that point, things were stuck at 20, and so we made an allowance so that it was one family at that point. In this situation, we'll let it sort out. We'll keep those families, in the loop essentially. If we're able to add a 1 or 2, we'll have to have a lottery because there are 4 or 5 families, these 2 schools, which is all by the policy. And then may be able to get a couple or something in. In the school committee policy, if we go above, 2 above the guidelines, then we have to consider adding some staff. So I'd come back to you and make sure we're following that. But there are some allowances, but at this point, sort of where we are. And it's hard to know, if it's going to change or not, honestly.
Is this 20 student per class for all grades or just kindergarten?
Kindergarten and it's higher as you go up the higher grades.
So if we were to make an exception or possibly waive our policy and work with it, it may not be an issue going into the higher grades,
Right,
as it would be coming into kindergarten.
but you do want to, we want to be really careful because almost always you have folks moving in during the school year.
Right,
And
and moving out.
right, and so if we get, we don't want, and by your guidelines, don't want, kindergarten classroom sizes of 23, 24, so we have other space in the district, so.
Traditionally, we get on the Dave's opening school, 3 or 4 or 5 new kids unregistered.
Yeah, and we should expect that, and that's why, even honestly, Beaman is right there,
Right.
But some things, those things also always sort out always sort out in some way in August and September.
Are we gonna get to a point where we stop accepting applications? If all our spots are full and we're at that 20?
No, we have to educate whatever student shows up.
Right,
Absolutely. It depends on which school.
so when
You know.
all the schools are full and we're still getting applications,
Oh,
what's the plan?
well, full is a relative term. Full is by your guidelines.
Right, and that's what I mean.
Yeah, so you have an allowance in the guidelines about when we go over in kindergarten specifically, then there's in other grades too, then we make staffing decisions and would consider what would be necessary for any additional staffing that could be helpful.
So the point I'm trying to get to, and I'm not trying to challenge or anything.
No.
is It sounds like we have a bubble this year of kindergarten kids coming in. It's gonna
Well-
be a bigger class, by the sounds of it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly, right.
We know
And then-
more kids show up the first day that we didn't know about and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So if we are at the point where we are full in all of our classes, because we're not far from there, can we go back and revisit this issue if we're gonna be going over the guidelines? In other words, if 7 kids need to go to veterans, but there's only 3 spots, and now you have 4 kids that need to go to veterans, it's kind of the same as the 4 kids that want to get into West Parish. Actually, they might even free up
Well-
space in other schools by going to West Parish. So
Yes
I
and
just
no,
want to make sure
yeah.
that this conversation stays open if
Oh,
we
yeah,
get to
yeah.
that point.
Yes and no. First of all,
'Cause
you
we've heard from
can revisit
parents.
any school committee policy you want to whenever you want to.
Right.
That's not up to me. But I do want to make a distinction between school choice and homeschool. Homeschool folks have a right to go to that class, that school, no matter where they are, before we move them out.
Right, no,
Okay.
I'm not,
Yeah. No, and so
absolutely.
if more and more come in, no matter what school it is, say it gets up to 24, we have to address that.
Yeah.
Just for example, there is a bubble class at West Parish, and it's the 4th grade this year.
Right,
And we have added an additional classroom there. So there, instead of 3, there are 4. Okay, so that's the sort of thing we can do. At this point, I wouldn't call the kindergarten class a bubble. It's just high enrollment right now, and we'll see how it sorts out. But I think of a bubble class as something that's more significant than that. And then just a few.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
So to say what Kathy has reminded me of countless times over the last 6 years, we've made great strides as a district, and we don't want to, start changing policies that have been effective to go back. So I appreciate that. If we, just throw 25 kids in a kindergarten classroom, may have a immediate benefit of like keeping those 5 kids happy, but have a negative impact to the district going, oh, this kindergarten class size is too high. So I appreciate the balance there. But I do think, to what Kathy and Melissa said tonight, it would be nice, kind of going on your let's say how school starts.
Yeah.
And then come back in because, so West Parish, if, if 3 of the 4 got in, that's 66, that's 22. It's right on the threshold of before we become wave a policy, right? We certainly had class sizes of 22, and that's different than a class size of 25. And so just, for anyone listening to this meeting tonight, we're doing the best we can, but I think that the best we can walk out of here with is we'll talk about it, first meeting after school starts and see if there's,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just want to clarify, these are, when you say school choice in,
Mhm.
from out of district?
No, these are just,
All these school choice in are intra-district.
yeah, we're only talking about Gloucester residents right now.
So we are
That's all we're talking
accepting,
about.
because we're full,
Yeah.
no one from out of the district.
no, I don't agree with that.
2 different
because
things. We're just talking about in Gloucester and kindergarten.
Got it.
So there have been other school choice within the district, not many, wanting to go to a different school in other grades, and there's openings there. And
Right.
and then there have been some, for example, a few choicing in from outside of Gloucester into the high school, into O'Malley, a couple, and then I believe also at the other other elementary grades, but small numbers, but yeah.
So I can say that a family reached out to me that is from Rockport. They have a child in 4th grade at West Parish, wanna enter the kindergarten child and was refused because they live in Rockport. And now she's trying to figure out, I have a child in Rockport and I have a child in Gloucester. How am I gonna manage that? So I know of a family that's in Rockport that's trying to get their child into West Parish where the sibling is already.
Oh, yeah, no,
attending.
no.
So there are those issues too.
No, yeah, but I
So
didn't,
that sibling would probably be here in your
In-
footnote.
Yes, there are two examples
Because it's a sibling.
of, I
Like
believe
from
siblings.
Not intra-district.
No, I know, yeah, I think
Yeah.
there are, I think it's two examples of folks who've choiced into our school system from outside Gloucester. And now the sibling want to enter kindergarten. I can't remember if it's one or two.
Yeah.
But you're right, I was really zeroing, when I say 4 and 5 families, I'm talking about just inside Gloucester.
Okay.
There are
So
one or
there's
two
more.
on top of that.
Okay.
From outside of Gloucester, yeah.
Thank you.
That is such a bummer, right?
It
It's
is,
like there's
'cause now-
there's a trend we're looking for. And not blame, like the things are what they are, but like, isn't that, what almost, and I mean, it's a facetious way, like what a neat problem we're having. Like,
I know.
the Rockport kids, we can't find room for the incoming Rockport kids. Like, I'm so happy we're in this position, but I really hope we solve it, right? Because I don't want to,
According to our policy, we leave the policy is like, people wouldn't know necessarily till August 10th or something like that anyway
For kindergarten,
for kindergarten.
yeah, for
right?
other
So we're
grades,
not
we've
even at
already
that
told them.
date Yet anyway, but we have the situation.
Yeah, so it's really by the end of the first week of August, which is what we're, doing. But to move it up earlier,
No.
yeah, it
I'm
doesn't
not
make any
saying
sense.
that.
Yeah,
But we also have to consider too, for the letter that I forwarded to you today that was sent to us regarding the situation, families are concerned that they're breaking their families up because the siblings aren't allowed in, and now they have students in different schools, which exposes them to 2 different bubbles. You know how we try to keep kids. So we also have those type of issues to address. If it gets to high COVID numbers,
Yeah,
you're
it's-
exposing one family to more.
but many families, because they're in elementary and middle. I mean, that's
Yeah,
not,
that's
it's
true.
not an
Same
uncommon
thing, yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
Now, this is just for kindergarten. So if that family wanted to school choice in for first grade, and there's a higher allowance for,
I believe the allowance is the same at first grade. I don't know
Okay.
for sure,
okay,
but there are openings later on. I'm not sure where the cutoff is, I can't remember. But yeah, you mean, yes.
like if they wanted to choice in the next year and there was room.
That's something, I
That's
think
a
that's a possibility, where the threshold is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Yeah,
Right now.
okay.
Raining again.
Woohoo!
well, we needed the rain.
I think we've had enough rain now, Mr. Mazza, but okay. All right, moving on. So next slide, our primary objective this year is always the same, but this is a little bit different than last year. Safely educating all our students in our schools every day to maximize learning, address our students' full needs, and support community and family needs. So our guiding beliefs, so remember we had guiding beliefs last year for our planning and in terms of holding school. These aren't that different from last year. But we certainly learned last year that every day matters, and to be in school every possible day is essential to educating, supporting, and preparing our students for their future. We also talked last year a lot, and we'll continue to talk as long as I'm superintendent here about the academic, social, emotional, mental health needs of our students. They're best served with our staff, with our teachers every day when they can be there in school. Just like last year, our decisions need to be based on facts, science, and data. In particular, we need to make decisions based on the situation in Gloucester, our surrounding community, Massachusetts. Certainly, like a year ago, things are very different than a year ago. They sort of have this feel to me of being similar, but they're things that are categorically different. Once again, Massachusetts is categorically different than many other states, and still Gloucester itself is different than many other communities in Massachusetts. So as we did last year, we'll continue to make decisions based on the data that's local to our area and our state. Our health and safety of our children and our staff continue to be the highest priority, and we'll continue to look at risk associated not just health in terms of related to COVID, but also the risk our families and our students face on social, emotional, mental health support, learning loss, social, emotional impact, and well-being in many dimensions. Our community and our students were better off last year because we did so much work to keep them in school. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And so we'll continue to have that balanced approach to risk, and we really need to. The next slide is actually from last year. If you're looking at the color version of this, you would see that we've reverted to the blue-green, not the yellow. But anyway, what I'm getting at is last year, this slide said, and we based our decisions last year on guidance from DESE and from Mass Department of Public Health, and working very closely with Gloucester Department of Health. Okay, I expect we'll be doing that the same this year, but I just wanted to remind people that's how we made a decision last year. We based our decision on last year, and those decisions worked out very, very well. Okay, we'll have to keep working on that to make sure we're going to do that same thing this year. So in terms of our approach, it will be layered, and this is a new term, but it makes a lot of sense. It's what we did last year. But as the chairman said in the beginning, vaccination is the #1 and most important layer. If I could mandate vaccines, I would. I cannot do that. Okay,
So-
I'm not doing that right now. For anyone who's listening,
Can I ask the question on that?
yeah, let me just finish one thing. But it is really, really important. I'll show some data in a moment that we're doing well in Gloucester, both for our teens and our adults, but we can do better. And everything we can as a body and myself, working with the mayor and others to promote vaccinations, we really, really, really need to do. So
It's my understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected, that other districts in the Commonwealth, including another district on this island, has mandated as a condition of employment a COVID vaccine for all staff.
I will look into that, and you should look into that as well. I'm not aware of that.
Yeah.
And, but I think it's worth looking into.
Yeah, it's my understanding. Again, I could be wrong. Yes. The Lighthouse Keeper School.
Masks and face coverings, we will have those in some way, shape, or form this year. We'll talk more about that later in tonight's meeting and for the rest of the month, I'm sure. We will continue to ensure that our ventilation systems are operational or fully operational. May be able to, we'll continue to maintain those. We will continue. Our families did this so well last year. They kept their children home when they had symptoms or were feeling sick. That will be essential again this year for so many reasons. So we will continue to broadcast that, continue to support our families in doing that, staff as well. It just was a real game changer for us last year, and it needs to be this year too. Hand washing and hand sanitizing. Again, this is, these are basic. These two are, basic. Covering your mouth when you cough. Those are basic. Hygiene approaches that our whole society needs to do more of. And we learned last year they really make a difference. And so we'll continue those and all the communication around that. We will have multiple forms of testing. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. And we'll also have contact tracing and quarantining again. Those may change. I'll give you some information on that too.
Just the one thing I'm noticing isn't here is any distancing at all.
Yes, we'll talk more about that. That's sort of up in the air. That's one thing we expect more guidance come out or that more guidance may come out on. Okay, from the students. So I'm going to go to the next slide. Vaccination and testing. We were already beginning to work on vaccination clinics at the beginning of school, and then as necessary as needed, follow on those. The State Department of Education, Department of Public Health are working a lot with schools on that, and we'll probably be able to get that. They will fund most, if not all, of that. Also, as needed, work with the local Department of Health too. But the state's really putting a lot behind that. And same with diagnostic testing, which is the rapid antigen testing. It's something we had in place last year, but we weren't using it for diagnostic purposes. We will probably use it much more often this year, just for those. Last year, we were using this if people were symptomatic. This year, it's likely we'll use that to check if they have, if they've been in close contact, that sort of thing. But more protocols and information will come around that. And the weekly screening tests, we're looking into, and I'm hoping we'll have weekly screening tests, the pool testing, same thing as we did last year, in all of our schools. Including elementary, yeah, that's what we're looking at, that's what we're hoping to do. Again, this is more, I just want to be clear for folks who are listening, this is what we're working on and working towards, okay? We expect to have in place and then we'll give you more details as we go along in the month. So going to the next slide, working with the Gloucester Department of Health. So we'll continue to monitor with them and get data on community transmission, vaccination coverage, testing, and also changes in positive cases. I'll give you some information on that. That's current in a moment. And contact tracing will also, they have 2 contact tracers now. They moved to the contact tracing collaborative, the statewide effort. Now they've pulled back on some of that and have 2 nurses that are helping with contact tracing locally now again. So, and talking to Max Schenk, the assistant director, if the city needs to add, they'll look into that if things, change, basically. So that'll happen. Let's move to Gloucester, the data on COVID in Gloucester right now. So 14 active cases as of yesterday in Gloucester. Typically last summer, there were fewer than 5. At that time, no vaccinations, obviously, but also people were very much isolated last year. I mean, if folks want to remember last summer, I don't particularly, but it was people were not congregating, simply. I mean, some were obviously, but nothing like is happening now, which is good, but also different. Vaccines are available. That is the single biggest game changer. I know folks are concerned about breakthrough cases. Today, the state released data that 0.18 of the 4+ million people who've gotten fully vaccinated.
0.8%.
Wait, sorry, 0.18% of those who've been fully vaccinated have gotten breakthrough cases in the state. Okay, that means that almost 99% essentially of folks who have been fully vaccinated are not getting COVID. So again, it's a reminder that those who are getting sick are those who are not vaccinated. And despite the news on breakthrough cases, it's a rare occurrence. It gets a lot of news and raises my anxiety, but it's still very rare. And that's important for us to remember. And then last year also, we had done school managing COVID. We know in the worst it has been, we were able to get through it well and safely. That helps. But then also as massive uncertainty last year about where COVID goes and what happens. I'm not saying things aren't uncertain now. Delta obviously, really changes things in a lot of ways. But we do have a sense, I think, of how things ebb and flow and how to minimize it when possible, how to and how to live with it. And still, it's nerve-wracking for all of us. I won't diminish that. Let's see.
Are we collecting any data on how many of our staff are vaccinated?
Yeah, so we showed you at the end of last year, I can't remember the name, but from our survey, and we had a very high response rate on the
Okay.
survey.
And it was voluntary response.
Yeah, voluntary
Yeah.
response, but it was of our 600, so I don't have any hard data from, more than that at this
Okay,
point.
yeah.
But at that point, I believe was in the 80 or 90% range and can only go up from there.
And what about students now getting vaccinated?
Yeah,
Since
so-
they lowered the rate, when students come back to school, are you asking or if
Two
they've been
things. I'll
vaccinated?
show you actually the Gloucester-wide data in a moment
Okay.
for that age group. And then we're also able to track through the statewide system about vaccinations too.
Okay.
And so we'll have numbers on that. We can't share that data with anybody
Right.
in terms of, but we can share the numbers and percentages.
I just
And-
wanted to know if we were tracking it.
Yeah, we're definitely tracking it, definitely. So actually, let me get into those numbers now. So on the next slide, you see the COVID-19 vaccination data. The age group is on the left. This is folks in Gloucester, okay, on the left. And you can see 12 to 19 years old. At this point, 63% of all 12, 19-year-olds in Gloucester have been vaccinated. This is at least one dose. So we're assuming, the second dose is coming if it already hasn't happened. That's higher than I expected, honestly. I think that's a solid number. And we'll do everything we can to get it up. And then you see the other number is 68 for 2029. And then 83 and higher as we go up to 30 years and older. So on the right-hand side is the comparison of all those in the community who've had at least one dose with the statewide average, and Gloucester is doing better than statewide, which is great. So fully 3/4 of those in the community had at least one dose. And this is updated weekly from the local health department, and so they'll be posting that publicly, and I'll share it with you when we have meetings.
And I don't know if you're going to know the answer to this question, but is the health department reaching out, or what kind of outreach is the health department doing to make sure that people are getting the second dose?
I don't know.
No, you don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't know.
Okay.
And I don't know why it's reported this way. So I just don't know why, but
Yeah.
we can find out. We can
Okay.
find out. And
So
Max-
there's some protection in the first.
right,
Yeah,
right.
like, it's the delineation between the totally unprotected and the partial.
Yeah. And the assistant director, Max Schenk, from the Department of Health has the dates of your meetings in his book. Okay, so I'm not saying he's gonna be there for all the meetings, but he's at least aware to hold those dates.
Do we have a health director yet for the city?
I don't know. I don't know. No, I don't think we do,
Okay.
but I'm not aware of any more than that.
Can we have Max here at the next meeting when
Yeah.
we're discussing? this?
Yeah, on the 18th, yes. And then the next slide, just breaking it down and showing comparisons among first population groups compared to the state. So you see that, we're as high, if not higher in some places on some of the age ranges. And then also on the bottom there, just disaggregated by race and ethnicity. So you see, for example, that some racial or ethnic groups are higher than the state average and some are a little bit lower. It just varies basically, but just want to make sure you had that that where the city is tracking data both by age range and also race or ethnicity. All right, so state guidance. So first and foremost, the guidance was very clear. And that's why it's in quotes in bold there on the top, that all districts and schools will be required to be in person full-time 5 days a week this fall. They're not making any allowances for remote learning. They're not counting remote learning for learning time. So that's a very clear, unequivocal statement and requirement. Another piece is that all previously released DESE health and safety data requirements are lifted. So they're putting into place new ones. So I may refer back to old ones and you folks can remind me that those aren't valid anymore, okay? That's fine, but just so folks know that it's not a continuation of what was in place, it's actually the ending of that and then new guidance, okay? And they've given guidance on vaccinations, testing, and then I'll talk about upcoming information, masks and face covering. These are things I'm gonna go through right now. So on vaccinations, they're very clear that, as folks know, that Massachusetts has one of the highest vaccination rates in the country. Very important, obviously. That evidence continues to show that vaccines are safe and highly effective. The risk to children in terms of COVID still remains small. This is not and that vaccinations are a critical strategy to keeping students in school. So all things I've said already, but this was clearly laid out in the DESE guidance. Testing, the DPH and DESE are encouraging districts to have a robust testing in place. We will have that. Diagnostic and screening testing, screening tests to be used. We will have both of those. As I mentioned before, DESE and the Office of Health and Human Services will pay for the vast majority of costs related to both testing and related to testing, and they're going to be giving more information. So, example, there's a webinar next week. This week, came the form to sign up and sort of register your interest in it. So, pieces are falling into place day by day, week by week on this. In terms of more information coming, this is really important. This is why there are no decisions, and this is just sort of a placeholder tonight about where we are. Is there? If folks remember, there are many protocols for specific scenarios last year. It was one of the most helpful things I think DESE and DPH did. They're revising. They're putting a new version of that in the coming day or week. All right. In that, we'll also have more about what they're calling a test and stay approach. So, and also changes in quarantining, okay? So what they mean by test and stay, and again, this is, we don't have much information on this yet, is that if you're a close contact, you have the option to stay in school and be tested every day with the rapid test to, as long as you're asymptomatic. So that's something that will allow us to keep more folks in school, presumably. But again, more details will be coming on how to actually do that, and when you do and when you don't do that. And then also another thing that was very helpful last year was FAQs, which really looked in, helped people answer questions about that.
Can I just ask that while all this is being implemented, that we be cautious of the fact that we don't have nurses assistants anymore? We used to have them, you wouldn't know that, it was a long time ago. So that sounds to me like a lot more responsibility on the one nurse that's in each school. So
Yeah.
I don't know if somebody else is able to assist, if there can be any kind of job created for that.
Yeah.
But it just sounds to me and hearing what I'm hearing that there's gonna be a lot of testing this year, which I think is great.
Yeah.
But that's also a lot of extra work on
Yeah,
the
yeah,
nurses that are
yeah.
already working a lot. So I just want to make sure that we keep that in
Great,
mind.
it's an important reminder, and as you remember, we actually hired 2 testing assistants or 2 folks to help with the testing, Manley
Yeah.
and Gloucester High last
Right.
year, and we'll probably need that plus more as well. And
Yeah,
Jeff Barco is, in addition to having a newborn child, congratulations to him and his wife, a newborn daughter, and also working at Camp Spindrift. He's also just recently been engaging in this and work on this, and I have a tremendous confidence in Jeff and her nurses, and we'll be able to, add staff as necessary for those pieces. Yeah, great, thank you. So that's again, this is sort of, as I mentioned in my notice to families and staff, this is, trying to make sure people just get some information now, but more information will be coming. The biggest piece, not the biggest piece, but I think probably the piece that's going to get the most attention from a lot of folks is just masks and face coverings. What's going to happen with that? The 2 things on masks, personally, not a big fan in life in general. And I feel like there's been about 3 weeks this year where, just recently where I didn't have to worry about them, and now we've got to worry about them again. At the same time, they are one of the single best prevention mechanisms we have. Vaccinations, of course, are number 1, masks are number 2. And so even though I have very mixed feelings about them, they're an important step for all of us. And so, but the question is how and who, honestly. So let me tell you what Mass DPH and DESE are recommending. They're strongly recommending that all students who are vaccinated, which of course is K to 6, and plus some other folks, but all folks who are not vaccinated wear masks. They also strongly recommend that all unvaccinated staff in all grades wear masks. So anyone who's unvaccinated or not eligible for vaccination or can't have a vaccination should be masked. That's their strong recommendation. They're also recommending that schools allow students who are vaccinated to remain unmasked. Okay, big difference from last year. It just says vaccination is a big difference. So they're saying masks are not necessary outdoors and may be removed while eating indoors. Okay, they've not given us any further guidance on eating yet, and I'm not sure if they will. Okay, but just so you know that difference, masks they're saying are not necessary outdoors or while eating indoors. They are advising anyone who's at a high risk or anyone who chooses to wear a mask, and that should always be encouraged. And I will certainly encourage it for that, personally anyway. School buses. This is by federal public health order. Everyone on a school bus has to wear a mask. Okay. And then specific areas like all staff and students must wear masks while in school health offices, which is probably probably should become a normal way of operating, honestly. So those are the pieces right now. I'll share one more thing here, and this is, yeah.
Is there any advice or recommendation on how we ascertain who is vaccinated and who is not, of the people who can be students or staff?
There's no guidance from anyone that I know of. I mean, no state agency has given us guidance on that. There are, as you hear in the newspapers, lots of challenges around that sort of thing.
It's obviously a question if we say it's an honor system.
Yeah.
If we make that choice, if you're vaccinated, you don't wear a mask.
I mean, vaccination is not an honor system for any other vaccine we have.
Right.
Every year, parents fill out a
To
form
show it.
with the full immunos.
I know, but
Yeah.
for this one, it hasn't yet. become
Sorry,
something
Kathy, I cut you off.
That we are asked, there hasn't yet been a place that I know of where people are asking for proof from students or staff in schools. So it just is a question to me, if wherever we go on this, how we then are following this.
Yeah.
So I know at the high school level, there's a particular, I think it's, I can't remember which it is, but there's a vaccine for the kids that they get 2 shots. And I definitely got a request to provide documentation that second shot had been administered.
Hepatitis or the HP one?
I think it was like meningococcal.
Oh, sure.
something, yeah, meningitis maybe. So there clearly are ways in which the school has some vaccination information that they were tracking. And so I don't know what the rules are given this vaccine is not.
Wait, but when you register a child, you have to show their vaccine, so I mean, that's not
This one hasn't been
anything different.
included yet. This one hasn't been.
Right.
Right,
That
so
hasn't
that's
been
a
on state
question
level.
of when are they catching up to help us understand, help the nurses understand, help the school district understand individual status.
Right, it's a real issue if we're going to be having people unmasked. Inside the-
I agree.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. It's the challenges aren't as big as they were last year, but in some ways they're a little more complicated, honestly. We all could be operating from the same page last year. And we did a great job of that. This guidance, changes that. I mean, and yeah.
Did anyone see the news out of Indiana this week? Basically, a state university in Indiana was requiring vaccinations, and someone sued, went up to the federal appeals court. And federal appeals court actually citing a Massachusetts case about smallpox said this public school has every right to require,
Absolutely.
require that they get vaccinated and they prove they're vaccinated before they can come enjoy, it was higher education, right? It wasn't K-12, but still, remember saying, right, exactly, saying that this is
It's
absolutely,
because we're
and there's
public,
precedent
that's why
coming out of Massachusetts, it was like in 1905, back I read the case. Back then, you get arrested and criminally charged if you didn't have a smallpox vaccine, which is always hilarious. People are like, when they're like, oh, they're pushing these vaccines so hard, like no one's getting arrested over a COVID vaccine. 100 years ago, you got arrested over a smallpox vaccine. So like, let's put some perspective on this, everybody. Calm down. You tell the school every year a list of vaccines
Right.
that your kid has had and when they have them. You give them a copy of their physical report, right? Like, has height, weight, all this stuff in it. Like,
But do we track that same for staff vaccines?
I don't know. I can find out though. I don't think so, but I don't know. Jeff Parker asked if we should be here tonight. I said no. I just said yes.
No, we just had a baby, leave him alone.
That's what I was trying to do. I said no.
I mean, I think we'll know a lot more next meeting too. There might be some guidance on that next.
I think that's what's hard right now. And I think, I'm sure hard for folks, who, at home and that sort of stuff. And is that, I hate to say this, but things are going to change between now and the next 3 weeks. There's going to be different information. There's going to be different, perhaps guidance might change. I agree, Sam. We have to, at this point, be comfortable with, being uncomfortable.
Yep.
And we got pretty good at that last year, so we're good at it,
And quite honestly, the numbers are going up every week. And so we don't know what it's gonna look like come September.
right.
This might completely shift. Not in terms of like going to school, but I just mean like,
No.
there might be less flexibility around mask
Yeah.
guidance.
Right, some of the decisions
come
that we have to
September.
make
We don't
may become
know.
very clear.
Yeah.
or made for us.
They'll be
Yeah,
made
yeah.
for us.
Maybe-
A mandate rather
That
than a
might
guide.
happen,
Right.
so.
Is it our intention to come to some sort of decision at our next meeting, which is I think the 18th?
Just you wait, I have it all here in the presentation.
So can I ask, I don't know.
No,
if I should-
I'll answer the question. No, what I'm putting forth to all of you tonight is that the 18th I would have my recommendations, okay, based on what we know at that point, and the 25th, you folks would vote on any protocols necessary for opening school.
So
Okay,
can I ask to be proactive in getting a legal opinion for the August 25th date, because it might take some time to get it?
I don't have to ask
So
me.
I know how we want the Board of Health here, and I appreciate that, but I also like legal
Yeah,
ability too, instead of us relying on what we know and trying to figure out.
Yep.
So I guess when you make your recommendation and we come to a vote on August 25th, I know a lot can change by then, and like we said, the vote may be easy or it may not be, depending on where we're at in the world. But in case it's not obvious and the DESI guidelines have not changed much, I know for me to make that decision, I would want to have some sort of legal opinion that if we voted in a policy that was stricter than the DESI guidelines, stricter than what the governor has mandated for the Commonwealth, and stricter than any policy or mandate in the city of Gloucester, if we were to mandate mask wearing for all students when that's not the recommendation, if we're going to pose some sort of consequence to that, what standing do we have against a parent that is not going to send their child to school with a mask.
Mhm.
So I guess I want to know that, because it's one thing to say, yes, everyone has to wear a mask, but there's a lot of conversation going on right now just because of the current situation, which could get worse, could get better, we don't know. But I just want to make sure that if we get to that conversation and the mandates have not changed as they are today, that we have a legal ability to even put some sort of discipline in place if a child comes to school that's been vaccinated without a mask. You know, I don't want to have that battle when it happens. I want to be prepared in our decision and actions going forward within the policy that we create on this, if any. When we make that decision on the 25th, I don't want it to be a, oh, let's wait and see. I want to know that answer when we make the decision.
And you're not signaling that Minister will make the decision, but you want all the tools available.
All
So
the
if-
tools
if that-
available,
If
exactly.
that option's on the table, we
Yeah.
know it's been vetted. It may not be the one we select,
Right,
but if it's
exactly.
one of the options we're
Yeah.
talking about, we make
Yeah.
sure it's actually a viable option.
Yeah, I just
I
want
just
to
don't, right, I don't want to walk away from this meeting going, oh, there's the signal as to where they're going. We don't know where we're going.
right. I mean, I can see we have 43 people watching tonight, and looking at the names, I know some, as we all do in this community, I can see some are very strong mask supporters and some aren't. So I have to believe that when we get to this decision, there's going to be a lot of conversation about it. And I just want to make sure that we've done our due diligence to know that not only are we doing what's best for the safety of our staff and students, but that we also have legal standing in anything that we decide to do.
I do know that the School Superintendent's Association is, working with, their legal team to give us that sort of guidance. And we may have to, look in addition to that as well. So, yeah, great, absolutely. Well, and then one thing that's important, this is relevant to what we were just talking about, is that right now, CDC and Mass Department of Health, Public Health, DESE differ on masks. Okay, so I just want to be clear about this. So I just went through what Massachusetts, where they stand on vaccinated people wear masks indoors regardless of age. Vaccinated students and staff do not have to wear masks indoors, okay? CDC is saying on this slide here that they recommend universal indoor masking regardless of vaccination status at all levels, okay, of community transmission. So they're saying clearly that, this point, indoors, masks should be worn, okay? And then mask use is particularly important. They're also saying that physical distance cannot be maintained. They're a lot, and it's interesting, they're a lot where Massachusetts was a year ago. And now Massachusetts is ahead of them again. Now, as I said earlier, we made our decisions last year based on Massachusetts guidance, and we're doing very well. But I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm just sort of acknowledging the difference right now, and also reminding folks how we did last year. So, but again, we'll get more information next few weeks, and as we did last year, make the best decision possible with the information we have. And then just what I've sort of said, but here it is on the screen. So again, tonight, so in the next couple of weeks, we'll be doing the work to see if interpreting the additional guidance that will come out from DESE and DPH. We'll continue to monitor the local COVID data and continue to make progress on the different pieces of putting in place. And that's everything from, the testing and vaccination and making sure we have staff to do that well. I'll make recommendations on COVID protocols on the 18th. The intention of you folks voting on them on the 25th, which puts us in good shape for teachers and students to begin the following week.
I think you've taken 10 days away from our students.
Put the 21st.
Yeah, they start 9 days ahead of the teachers. The math house in here.
Sorry, just a typo, folks, just a typo.
Cancel your vacation.
August
get back
31st,
here.
sorry. Wow, that's a bad typo.
Very bad.
But anyway, so that's how I see things, shaping up. Principals are hard at work, our teams are hard at work, at this point, more and more folks will become, harder and harder at work to get this up and running. I just do want to remind folks, we all did a fantastic job last year. There's no reason to believe we can't do that again this year. And vaccinations are here, our community's doing a very good job on it. And, it's a big change. It's a big change that I need to keep reminding myself, and I hope to reminding others too.
just to ask, we never went back to the distancing question.
So Desi has not said anything about that, okay? No, that's not true. They have not said, put any limits on it. They have said, no district should institute any distancing that keeps kids out of school, okay? Remember last year, a couple things, distancing kept us out of school. But the 6 feet at lunch certainly kept us out of school. I mean, that's changed the whole district, right? That really was the major one. We were able to do 3 feet. More complicated at, and then the lunch distancing obviously was complicated as well here at the high school. So they're not saying anything at this point. They do say, and I think it's prudent, when we can have distance, but we'll have to work with, we did return all the furniture to its rightful place, and in our schools. And, if we have all kids here at the high school, that means that a lot of desks we did use last year are not available to us because they need to be here. And they weren't all here last year.
And the tents, are we still thinking of tents outside at all to give extra space?
Yes, no decisions. We sort of had great meetings with our leadership team last week, principals and other district leaders, and sort of touched on tents, danced around tents. I think that's one of those things TBD.
Okay.
But there's obviously a lot of it worked well last year,
Yeah.
and to positive effect. And one thing is pretty clear is people really, really see the value of getting outside. Especially for snack breaks. Folks used to have snack breaks while kids were sitting at the desks, and the folks have had a change of heart on that. Get them outside, and even for 10 minutes helps a lot. On so many levels. So that's tents are TBD, and really we'll keep working on that. But they're out there and they're available. Yeah.
Okay.
Just 2 things on yours, on this. So are we putting this on our website? I suggest Stephanie attach this to the packet as well, since it's not part of the packet.
Okay,
So
yep,
if
yep.
anybody went to see what we did this time,
Yep.
it'd be great to have a presentation.
Sure.
Fix the typo.
Oh, I'm fixing it right now. Fixing it right now.
Before you attach.
It's fixed.
Before the
Second
kids
thing
start
is
showing
we
up.
have a BNF meeting on the 18th, a regular scheduled BNF meeting. So I'm hoping this meeting for the 18th for the school committee is a special school committee meeting with just this particular topic on it. So it doesn't get loaded with other business since we'll have been in another meeting prior. Okay.
Do you want to change that date?
Well,
It's up to you. I mean,
the intention was that it would be a regular meeting. Because we would have 2 regular meetings in August.
But the 25th is the regular meeting.
Well,
25th is
tomorrow,
not regular
next week,
decision.
the 14th would have been, next week, a week from today would have been, or a week from Wednesday would have been the regular
and the
meeting, and we're not
25th.
having
So
one.
you're saying the 18th and the 25th would be a special meeting.
No, I'm saying they both be regular meetings.
So we have.
Tonight's the
Got it.
session.
Okay.
Today's
All
the
right.
special. meeting.
Anyway, so I'm fine with moving the BNF, but we'll have to find a date.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So I have a
And I
question.
don't expect, I'm sorry, in terms of the 18th, like that's the agenda, what you see there. It's not a small agenda, but that's the agenda, no other presentations, that sort of thing. So,
Do you want to go first? Your hand up. So the 18th is going to be a regular meeting, which means public comment on the agenda. So are we anticipating receiving public input on this topic before we start this meeting? Just want to put that out there because parents are going to want to speak.
At
And
some
if it's a
point,
regular meeting, that we have to allow that opportunity at a regular meeting. So I'm not, just want to make sure that we include that into the timing of that night.
at some point, we need to take public input.
Absolutely.
It would seem to me that that should happen on the 25th. That's when we're going to talk about implementing things. We'll have the discussion on the 18th. We'll have updates on the 18th. We don't have to allow public input on items on the agenda. But people are going to want to ask questions. We're going to have to do that at some point. So I'm open on what people think.
Well, I'm just thinking we should probably schedule a public hearing and put that on the agenda and put it in the newspaper and give that ability so that if people try or want to speak to us beforehand, we can say we're taking testimony on such and such a date for that topic. Keep it organized and structured so that the conversation is balanced and there's opportunity to anyone that wants to speak.
Right, and I agree that a public hearing is appropriate. I do think as we balance the agenda for the next two meetings, I'm hoping that this time around, again, what we're talking about, although not unimportant, is less dire than the decisions we were making this time last year. So I'm hoping that it will not, in and of itself, drag out until 2 a.m. again. However, it is still going to be, not without controversy and not without contention and not without, deserving of us to give it thorough discussion. And so just ask that as we plan the agenda, it sounds like whatever of the 2 nights doesn't have the public hearing will be a long meeting because it'll have to carry a lot of stuff, so that the night with the public hearing has a shallower agenda, so that if that eats up a few hours of our time, not my thought.
Well, it would seem to me
There'll be
that
2 rough meetings coming up, but I would just want to make sure that the roughness is balanced across them.
that we should get the public input after we've had all the information presented before it.
Sure.
Agreed.
So that's why I'm saying it would seem to me that we would load up on the 18th and have the public hearing and make decisions on the 25th.
And people can also write to us, right? We have
Oh, yeah,
sure
Gloucester
can.
School Committee at gloucesterschools.com is another way people to communicate how they feel.
Well, I would recommend that any emails that come into that topic be part of the public hearing testimony, not anything else. If people are going to comment on that, it
People
should
can always-
it should be read into the record at the public hearing.
Okay.
Okay.
But it's just another way for people who can't be present at that
Oh,
time
absolutely.
to
Right.
communicate.
That's a point that we need to discuss further on as we try to transition back to full in-person meetings, about how people who don't want to, come in and speak to us can communicate. Because that's going to be an issue.
This will be a Zoom public hearing, at least for this one.
Yeah, this one will. August will do it just like we're doing now.
Right.
Both of these meetings, but come September, some of the boards and commissions are meeting in person and are not doing Zoom right now.
Yeah.
And, that's where we want to get to. I think
Well,
the idea of having a meeting and having it available on Zoom so people can watch, but not necessarily do the input. Like,
Okay. Good point.
I think I'm gonna push back on that. I think it's the importance that is behind parents and community members who cannot, for one reason or another, make it to our meeting to listen is the same. If they want to speak on an issue, should not be to say, well, if you're stuck at home, you can watch our meeting, but if you want to contribute to our meeting, you got to get in a car and get over here,
Yeah.
because the same thing that's keeping them home from missing a presentation in person is the same thing that's keep them home from the input. And we'll see. I guess we'll see how this will be a big public hearing, right? If it goes well on the 25th, and public is able to give us input in real time via Zoom.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have to ever step back and eliminate the ability from someone home unless open meeting law comes down and says, this is no longer acceptable public testimony. You must be in person at the venue to provide testimony at a public hearing.
And the state's doing legislation on that now, they're discussing it.
Right.
So right now it's just temporary and we can do it, but it's not permanent yet. So we can't take a vote because
Sure,
the law's not in place yet.
fair point.
But people have always been able to write.
Yeah, people can still write.
Sure.
Emails available.
it's just a question of whether we actually read the emails in the meeting or not, which we don't always do.
No, but we can state, like the city council does, we received an email in favor or opposed to whatever the topic is. And either say their
Right.
name or name and position, not necessarily read the language into the record.
All right.
But I don't think we're gonna get to that.
Anything else?
Answer itself.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, Maria?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weezer, Nancy,
Yes.
Mr. Cavazza,
Yes.
Chairman Coe,
Yes.
Ms. Prince.
Yes.
This meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much and stay tuned. There's going to be a lot more to talk about
Oh,
and
I
hear
see.
about.
And
This whole thing to the